Hi, hello, vanakkam, and welcome back to yet another episode on your favorite Little Slaw YouTube channel. So today in this video, you're going to see the differences, the third set of differences, the third day I would say. So previously we saw 10 differences between SOAP and the REST API, and I believe you must have enjoyed the video and you would have gained a lot of knowledge from that. So today in this video, we are going to see another five differences between SOAP and REST API, and they're going to be completely interesting and informative for you. So before we move on to this video, this is me, Asan Shanmugam. I welcome you all to our Little Slaw YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't subscribed it yet. And please do join my channel for more informative and interesting content and access to many training videos, exclusive training videos, I would say. And give a like if you give a thumbs up if you like this video and share the video with your friends. So now moving to this content today. So we are going to see the difference between the SOAP and the REST API. So in terms of the state. So the first difference is going to be the state. So in what way the SOAP and the REST APIs are different. So there are like before we see about the state. So there are like two different states. One is the stateful and then the other one is the stateless. So we all know about the stateful and stateless. So first, let me explain what is a stateful and what is stateless, so that you can correlate them with the differences in this video, right? So basically, the stateful and the stateless refers to how the interaction between the client and the server is managed with respect to maintaining the information about the conversation about multiple requests. So let me tell you in very simple terms, like when it comes to stateless. So we have like two states, one is stateless and stateful. So when it comes to stateless system do not retain information about previous request or interactions once the transaction is complete. So we all know about REST API, okay? Where if we send some request and if we get some information, we don't retain those information, right? So that's why APIs are completely different when compared to web applications, because they are like stateless, okay? And each request from the client to the server must contain all the information the server needs to process it, as no state is preserved between the requests. So that's another important reason, and that's why we call it as stateless, because we don't retain any information, any single information about the previous request or the interactions once the transaction is completed. Okay, and also when you are sending the request, you have to the request has to contain all the information. The request from the client to the server must contain all the information. So each request that we send from the client to the server is independent, and the server does not store any information. That's very important. It does not store any information, and that's why we call it as stateless about the previous interactions with the client. And scalability is easier because each request is handled in isolation. So it's very easy to scale up. It's very easy to scale up the stateless applications. So when it comes to REST API, so we're going to see about REST API. So since I have already mentioned it as stateless, each client request to a REST API is self-contained and it includes all the necessary information for the server to process it. So whenever we send a REST API request, we use to attach every single information to the request, and then we send it to the server from the client. So the server does not need to remember any state about the client between requests. So this statelessness that we are seeing contributes to the high scalability of RESTful services, especially in cloud-based architecture. For example, a REST API for a shopping cart, where every request must include the cart ID and the product details, and the server does not remember what was in the cart from the previous request unless the client explicitly sends that information. So that's the reason. I mean, like, since the server does not maintain the previous information, every time we have to send all the information to the server when you're sending it through the REST API. But when it comes to stateful, so again, stateless, we have so far discussed. So stateful should be completely opposite about that. So stateful system retains information about the client's interaction over multiple requests, not the previous request, but multiple requests. So which means it includes the previous request as well. So the server maintains context between requests, meaning it remembers the state of the conversation. So what are the key characteristics of the statefulness? So the server retains the state of the conversation across multiple requests, and each new request will rely on information stored from the previous request. And because of this, it maintains a state where it can make things like sessions. So that's the reason we do the correlation part, right? Where we get the value from the server. So we make things like sessions, we make things like transactions and complex workflows, which are easier to manage. But still, yep, I agree, it adds complexity and it impacts the scalability, right? Because it has some dependencies, right? It has to maintain the conversations. So that's the reason stateful are not scalable, but stateless, which is REST API, are scalable. So when it comes to SOAP, so it can be both stateful or it can be both it can be both stateful or stateless. So SOAP web services can be stateful or stateless depending on the design of the service. So in a stateful SOAP service, the server may store session information or other data about the client across multiple requests. So for example, during a multi-step transaction like a banking transaction, okay, so the server might keep track of the user account state as the transaction proceeds, and the stateful SOAP services can make complex operations which are easier but are harder to scale because the server must store the session information. Because when you want to scale up, you need to have the that particular scaled up session information, right? So since you should have the session information, if it is not there, you cannot scale up. So for example, um, in terms of online banking, okay, so since from the beginning I'm telling you about SOAP. So SOAP is a perfect application, a perfect service which is used for banking. So if you initiate a transfer and then request the current balance, the server might remember your account information and keep track of the transfer status across multiple requests. So I think we have discussed more about the state, about stateless, about stateful. So now we'll move to the next difference. So now the next difference between the SOAP and REST API is the transactions. So when it comes to transactions, the SOAP supports ACID transactions. So when I say ACID, it is atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. So we all have must have studied about ACID when in the database. It's a very basic concept about any transaction, so which makes it suitable for applications requiring complex transaction management, such as banking systems where multiple operations must either all succeed or fail together. So, for example, if you are taking some money from the ATM machine, okay, and when you are entering the amount, you're entering your PIN and all the details, and when you click enter, so by that moment, if the transaction failed, right? So if the transaction failed, the amount that you entered should not be debited from your account. Instead, every transaction should be cancelled, or if it is succeeded, then you must get your money in your hand, and that particular amount must be debited from your account. So either it has to be completely succeeded or it has to be completely failed. So this is called asset transaction, and this is possible in SOAP because it maintains the atomicity, it maintains the consistency, it maintains isolation and durability. So when it comes to REST, it is limited transaction support. So because REST does not natively support complex transaction management, and transactions in REST need to be handled by the client or through additional mechanisms which may not be as robust as SOAP's built-in support. So that is the difference between the SOAP and the REST API in terms of the transaction. So like I told you, SOAP is supports asset transactions, which is either completely failed or completely successful. But on the other hand, when it comes to REST API, it has limited transaction support. So REST does not support complex transaction management, which we all know. But transactions in REST needs to be handled by the client or through additional mechanisms, which may not be as robust as SOAP's built-in support. So we'll move on to the next difference, which is the extensibility now. And now we'll move on to the next difference, which is the extensibility. So extensibility difference between SOAP and REST API. So SOAP is highly extensible, which allows for integration of additional features such as security, addressing, and transactions through WS standards. So this extensibility makes SOAP a powerful tool for building complex enterprise level services. So when it comes to extensibility, SOAP is highly extensible. And on the other hand, when it comes to REST API, so REST API is less extensible, but compared to SOAP, I mean, like less extensible compared to SOAP, but because it is designed to be simple and lightweight, and we all know it even don't remember what it did in the previous transaction. So it's very lightweight, right? So while it can be integrated with other protocols and services, it does not have the same level of built-in extensibility as SOAP. So it can be integrated, but it cannot be extended. So that's the difference between SOAP and REST API. So just to recap, so REST API can be integrated, but REST API cannot be extended. But on the other hand, SOAP can be extended. It is extensible, highly extensible, and it allows for integration of additional features such as security, addressing, and transactions. But this extensibility makes SOAP a powerful tool for building complex and enterprise level services. We'll move on to the next topic, which is the tooling and support. So when it comes to the tooling and support, SOAP has a strong vendor support because SOAP has strong tooling support from major vendors like IBM, the Oracle, and Microsoft, because these tools provide comprehensive features for developing, testing, and managing SOAP services, which is beneficial for large scale enterprise projects. So, when it comes to tooling, SOAP has a strong tooling vendor support. And when it comes to REST, it also has a wide community support because REST has extensive community support and a plethora of open source tools available for development, testing, and documentation. And this broad support makes it easy for developers to find resources and solutions contributing to REST's popularity. So that's the difference between the SOAP and the REST API in terms of tooling and supporting. And we'll move on to the last difference of this video, which is the message size. So coming to the last part of this video, the message size. SOAP has a larger message size because SOAP messages are typically larger due to the verbose XML format and the additional overhead of SOAPs. Yes, we all know the structure of it. It is the envelope, its header, and the body structure. So because of this particular format, I mean the templated thing, it is actually, I mean the SOAP is actually larger mainly because of the XML format. So this can lead to higher bandwidth consumption and slower performance, particularly over slower networks. So SOAP is larger basically, but when it comes to REST, we all know it is built on top of JSON because I mean like REST messages are generally smaller because they can use more compact data formats like JSON. JSON are very compact and this reduces the bandwidth required and speeds up the communication, which makes REST more suitable for applications where performance is a critical factor. So with that, I come to an end of this video, and we'll meet in our next video. That's going to be the last video for the difference between the SOAP and REST API. And yeah, so we are done for this day. And until I meet you in my next video, it's bye bye from Vasan Shanmugam and your favorite Little Star YouTube channel. Take care and bye bye.